Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're joining us today because we're going to unpack one of the most invisible, yet absolutely powerful engines running our entire global economy. We're talking about the loanable funds market. Seriously, if you've ever deposited a paycheck, swiped a credit card, or even just wondered why a bank pays you to hold onto your cash, you're already an active player in this market. So today, we're going to visualize exactly how it works, what drives it, and how all those gears turn behind the scenes.
To start us off, let me ask you kind of a weird, counterintuitive question. Does money actually have a price tag? We usually think of money as the thing we use to pay for a price tag, right? But what if you don't have the money right now and you really need it? Or, on the flip side, what if you have extra money and someone else wants to use it? Well, it turns out money itself is a commodity. It can be bought, sold, and rented.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our quick roadmap for today. 1. Meet the money market. 2. The price of money. 3. Factoring in inflation. 4. Supply, or why we save. 5. Demand, why we borrow. And 6. Finding the equilibrium. Section 1. Meet the money market. Think of the loanable funds market just like a massive metaphorical store or a farmer's market. But instead of trading apples or electronics, the item changing hands is the money itself.
Now, every market needs buyers and sellers, right? And the money market is divided into two very distinct camps. Over on the left side, we have the supply side. These are the savers. This includes individuals, households, or businesses whose current income is just greater than what they need right now. When you leave money in a savings account, you are literally supplying funds to this market. Then on the right side, we have the demand side. These are the borrowers. We're talking college students taking out loans, businesses seeking capital to build new factories, or even governments running a budget deficit. They need money right now, and they are totally willing to pay for it.
Section 2. The price of money. So if the loanable funds market is a store where money is exchanged, how do we know what that money costs? What actually bridges the gap between the savers and the borrowers?
Well, the answer is the interest rate. The interest rate is the literal price tag of money. Let's look at a really concrete example to see how this works. Imagine a pharmacist. She wants to buy a new, high-tech computer system for her business, and it costs $3,000. She runs the numbers and realizes this specific computer will increase her business profits by exactly 10%.
And this brings us to the absolute golden rule of business borrowing, the investment decision rule. A business will invest if the expected rate of return is strictly greater than the interest rate. So back to our pharmacist. If the bank offers her a loan at an 8% interest rate, she's going to borrow the money. Why? Because she pays 8% to get the cash, but her business grows by 10%, meaning she pockets a nice net profit. But if the bank's interest rate is, say, 12%, the cost of the money is higher than her expected return. It would cause a literal loss, so she simply won't borrow. The interest rate dictates the whole shebang.
Section 3. Factoring in inflation. Look, we absolutely can't talk about the interest rate without bringing up the hidden force that constantly manipulates the true value of those rates, and that's inflation. To understand the real, true cost of borrowing, or the true reward for saving, economists use something called the Fisher equation. It states that the real interest rate is roughly equal to the nominal interest rate minus the inflation rate. The nominal rate is just the sticker price, the actual percentage the bank is paying you. But the real rate? That's what actually matters to your wallet, because it measures the true change in your actual purchasing power over time.
Let's actually walk through a calculation step by step to make this crystal clear. Step 1. You deposit $5,000 into an account that promises an awesome 8% nominal interest rate. Sounds pretty great, right? But wait, Step 2. The inflation rate during that year is 3%, meaning the general price of stuff went up. Step 3. By applying our Fisher equation, your real interest rate is actually only 5%. Sure, you have more dollar bills in your hand, but because everything costs more at the store, your true reward, your real purchasing power, only grew by 5%.
And this leads to a fascinating, kind of brutal economic reality. Unexpected inflation turns lenders into losers. If you lock in a loan to a friend, assuming zero inflation, and suddenly inflation skyrockets to 5%, the money they pay you back with is worth significantly less than the money you originally lent them. The saver loses purchasing power, while the borrower essentially gets to pay back their debt with cheaper money. Crazy, right?
Section 4. Supply. Why we save. Now that we know exactly how money is priced, let's zoom out. Let's look at the massive macroeconomic forces that physically move the supply curve in this market. What makes a whole country decide to save more or save less?
On the supply side, the curve shifts left or right based on a few key things. First is income and wealth. Obviously, if overall national income goes up, households have more leftover cash, and boom, supply shifts to the right. Second is time preference, basically how patient people are. If a society becomes super focused on the future, they save more today. But the third one is super fascinating, consumption smoothing. People naturally want a stable lifestyle. We borrow when we're young, we save intensely during our peak working years, and then we spend those savings in retirement. So if a huge chunk of a country's population suddenly hits their 50s, total savings in the economy will surge as they gear up for retirement. And that shifts the entire supply curve for loanable funds heavily to the right.
Section 5. Demand. Why we borrow. Okay, so that's the supply of money. What about the demand? What exactly is motivating businesses and governments to absorb all those savings?
Well, here are the major forces that shift that demand curve. First is the productivity of capital. If a brilliant new technology is invented, businesses are going to flock to the banks demanding loans so they can buy this amazing new highly productive equipment. Second is investor confidence. If business owners are highly optimistic about the future, kind of like they were during the massive tech boom of the 1990s, they will demand enormous amounts of capital to expand. That shifts demand to the right. And finally, government borrowing. When a government spends way more than it collects in taxes, it runs a deficit. To pay for things, the government has to borrow from the loanable funds market, massively shifting the total demand to the right.
Section 6. Finding the equilibrium. So the million-dollar question is, how does this gigantic push and pull of savers and borrowers actually balance out, without the whole system just crashing?
It balances out through a beautifully simple mechanism. In a closed economy, the market naturally reaches an equilibrium where total measured savings exactly equals total measured investment. S equals I. Think about it. If the interest rate is too high, there's a huge surplus of savings. Banks are just sitting on piles of cash that nobody wants to borrow. To fix it, banks lower their rates to attract borrowers. Conversely, if the rate is too low, there's a major shortage. Everyone wants a cheap loan, but nobody wants to save. So what do banks do? They raise the interest rate. The price naturally adjusts until the quantity of funds supplied perfectly matches the quantity demanded.
And this graph brilliantly illustrates exactly what we're talking about. If you look at this model of the credit card market, the downward sloping blue line is demand. As interest rates fall, people want to borrow more. The upward sloping line is supply. As rates rise, banks want to lend more. Right there in the middle at point E is our equilibrium. At exactly a 15% interest rate, the quantity of financial capital supplied by banks is exactly $600 billion, and the quantity demanded by consumers is exactly $600 billion. If the rate were artificially high, say 21%, you'd see a massive surplus. If it were low, at 13%, there'd be a huge shortage. The market clears precisely where supply meets demand.
Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. You know, the loanable funds market isn't just a bunch of abstract lines on a graph. It's literally the sum total of human patience, business optimism, and government priorities. Every single time you deposit a check, swipe a credit card, or plan for your retirement, you are a data point in this beautiful economic engine. So I want to leave you with this. How do your own future saving and borrowing choices fit into this massive, invisible global balancing act? Keep that in mind the next time you look at the interest rate on your savings account. Thanks so much for joining me on The Explainer, and keep learning.